After Columbus made landfall in 1492, the great European powers looked across the Atlantic and saw a vast continent. Despite being home to millions of indigenous people for thousands of years, these empires viewed this rugged landmass simply as an empty chessboard, ready to be carved up and claimed. Spain moved first. They focused on the southern interior, building the settlement of St. Augustine in Florida in 1565. Their goal was straightforward: establish a military buffer to protect the immense wealth pouring out of their conquered territories in Mexico. Further north, France took a different approach. Their explorers charted the cold waters of the St. Lawrence River, establishing a foothold in what is now Canada, before mapping their way deep into the massive Mississippi River basin. Meanwhile, England focused on planting permanent agricultural colonies right on the eastern seaboard. They dropped anchor at Jamestown in 1607 and Plymouth a decade later, struggling through starvation and harsh winters to force a permanent foothold into the soil. Smaller powers noticed the gaps left behind. The Dutch and the Swedes sailed right into the coastal pockets between the English settlements, eager to secure their own slice of the New World trade. The problem with all of this was geography. Kings and politicians back in Europe were drawing massive, sweeping claims on paper without any accurate maps. They were declaring ownership over thousands of miles of terrain, with no idea where one empire actually ended and another began. Claiming territory is easy, but doing so without drawing agreed-upon borders meant that the moment these small, isolated colonies began to grow, they were destined to crash directly into each other. The first domino fell on the coastline. By 1655, the Dutch grew tired of their Swedish neighbors on the Delaware River and aggressively conquered their settlements, absorbing them entirely. Less than 10 years later, the English did the exact same thing to the Dutch. A British fleet sailed into the harbor in 1664, swallowed the colony whole, and rebranded New Amsterdam as New York. By the dawn of the 18th century, the minor players were gone. The board was locked in a tense three-way standoff. Spain held the sprawling south, France controlled the sprawling interior river networks, and Britain was left holding a long, narrow strip of the eastern coast. But the British colonies were experiencing a massive population boom. 1 million settlers were living there by 1750, and they were running out of room. They were completely boxed in, trapped between the Atlantic Ocean at their backs and the imposing wall of the Appalachian Mountains in front of them. You cannot put that much demographic pressure behind an immovable geographic wall. Eventually, it is going to spill over. That pressure broke right around 1750. British colonial settlers, desperate for new farmland, pushed over the peaks of the Appalachians and began illegally descending into the highly fertile Ohio River Valley. This historical map illustrates the problem with that migration. The Ohio Valley lay directly inside the territorial boundary lines already claimed by New France. The expanding British frontier was now physically colliding with the French interior. Because there were no formal diplomatic borders, neither side had a clear legal mechanism to stop the other. The only markers of authority were the scattered frontier forts and the rivers themselves. In May 1754, a young Virginia militia officer was sent into that disputed territory to assert British claims. His name was George Washington, and his unit ended up ambushing a detachment of French troops in a small ravine known as Jumonville Glen. That brief, violent clash deep in the Pennsylvania woods acted as a match. It instantly ignited the overlapping territorial claims into a full-scale imperial war. Washington's localized skirmish rapidly escalated into the French and Indian War. It soon dragged in the parent nations, becoming the North American theater of the global 7 Years' War. Britain decided to end the border disputes permanently. They poured resources across the Atlantic, mounting an overwhelming military campaign that pushed relentlessly north until they had entirely conquered French Canada. With the 1763 Treaty of Paris, the New World was redrawn. France was erased from the continent, surrendering its vast holdings. The board split in two. A line down the Mississippi River left Britain controlling the east and Spain the west. But empires are incredibly expensive to expand. Securing this massive new territorial dominion left the British crown drowning in crippling war debt. To balance the books, Parliament decided the American colonists should foot the bill. They began levying a series of heavy taxes on the 13 colonies to pay for the exact war that had just secured their borders. The aggressive imperial war that Britain fought to claim and protect North America created the exact financial friction that would tear the empire apart. Within a decade, those taxes pushed the colonies to break free and birth the United States.